My name is Charles Brungart. I'm CEO of IllFonic.
And I'm Jared Garrettson. I'm the head of creative at IllFonic.
So can you guys talk about your game, Arcadegeddon? Love the name, by the way. Talk about how this idea became a game.
Ooh, Jared,
long story. Long story. It was the refactoring of an unfortunate, cause and effect of a project dying.
So we pitched this idea,
Yeah.
years ago, actually, and we really liked it. And then, someone else picked it up and it kind of attached it to their thing. And that thing eventually died due to some internal stuff that happened at that group. And so for us, we were luckily, Predator was successful enough to be able to basically float a lot of the company and the team and stuff like that, and same with other things that we were doing. So timing was just right, and we were able to, for us, we loved the game that we built. Like, we weren't sold to kind of where it went or where it became, where it went basically with kind of another group we're working with. And then when we were able to like fully say like, hey, let's take this and make it what we originally wanted to make it, we really just kind of focused on the gameplay, making something that was really fun. And we just, as a team, didn't want to let the idea go. And that's kind of where Jared started going crazy and started building the universe of Arcadegeddon, basically. So
yeah, to kind of speak to what we kind of have to allude to, but not allude to, is really it was an idea that we had that we thought was a really cool idea, got attached to something else. That thing whole that just kind of imploded. And so we essentially got a phone call 2 hours before Christmas break or holiday break, when we were going to go to, all of us were going to take 2 weeks off, really, kind of absorb the, the year that we had. We shipped Predator in COVID. We were doing a really great job with the project, and then it just kind of, vanished because of, not because of the game, but because of companies getting restructured and, that whole rigmarole that we've heard so many times. And so, Chuck calls me at I was in Scotland at the time visiting our kid, and he calls me and he's like, dude, what we thought has happened is like, okay, well, what do we do? And he's like, well, we're going to find out how much money we have. We're going to find out all these other factors. And, I think that we made a cool enough meta and game and thing, we need to figure out how to rebuild it. And so, we spent the Christmas break, the holiday break, pulling in a small group of people, like, hey, I've got this idea for, this character that, and I did project a lot. It's like this character essentially trying to save his arcade is getting attacked by the faceless corporation, and he needs to try to save it and try to keep this community of gamers going, and so that idea just kind of like spilled out onto the page. And then the big thing about it was like I thought about all the games that we've played in the past, or the games that kind of still resonated in my head, and the big thing that I really wanted to do is make something that had absolutely no connection to reality. So no human elements, nothing that you can connect to with the real world. That's why I was like, hey, let's have gibberish. Let's have no spoken, written language that you can understand. Let's make these characters like really out there, like punk rock Muppets, and let's make a crazy soundtrack. And really the reason why is I just wanted to escape. It was like, this year's been really tough for all of us. And so I just wanted to have a game that you can escape. Nothing would remind you of anything normal. And we had, just really the craziest soundtrack that you really haven't heard that much. And so we went off of those pieces. We pulled in Isaac, our art director, and I gave him the pitch. And I was like, I was looking at like the Gorillas and punk rock Muppets and all this crazy stuff. And he took that and just really made this amazing art style. And, while he was doing that, I worked on the backstory of these gangs and all of this other crazy stuff. And we started, we went in on like the Monday after the holiday break. And it's like, ta-da, the project's done, but we spent the past 2 weeks figuring out what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to do. And the really rad part is I feel like the team got more excited because it was ours and it wasn't this thing that we had to deal with. And the elements that we had zero control over were the most maddening parts of the previous project. And so it was kind of like, okay, we're free, we can run, we can do whatever we want. This is what we're doing. These are all the things that we're keeping with our gameplay. We have to rip all of this other stuff and we have to, remove all these parts. And really it was just one of those things where everything that didn't work now worked because we had control over it. And it was definitely, that kind of like that love song that we wanted to do of like previous games that really kind of struck that, it's like really crazy soundtrack was the big thing that I think a lot of people attached to. Was like, oh wow, I've never heard this type of music, or I've never heard this of this person, and I've never heard this type of stuff in a game. And so it was really fun. It was just like this kind of freeing experience, really.
Speaking to that, like your studio does a lot of work for hire, but when you have your own IP that you're working on, that's yours. You mentioned it's a bit different. Can you talk about some of the pros and cons in this situation because it's your own project rather than just plain work for hire?
Yeah, I mean, speaking from Predator, for example, we announced Predator as long as we hit the things that make sense for it. It's everyone is aware of it, in F13 and everything like that, where it's like, you have a built-in understanding of what it is and a built-in audience usually of what it is. And so you kind of have that easy to sell, idea versus like this new IP that we have control over. And we do, it's like we can show images of it to people and they instantly need to connect to another project or another game. And so, that's been the wildest part, is like, it's been a lot of really great connections to other great games. If people needed to do it. And so like, that's the big thing, is IP versus non-IP or original IP. It's like, we don't have to explain it. Like if we were to be like, oh, it's, this, IP, people instantly go like, oh, I know what I'm expecting with that.
It's always like two different things, right? If you asked us a year ago, we're probably like, oh yeah, we love like it. Like, I don't know what we would have felt about making our own IP based game, honestly, because it's like, oh, with like Predator or F13, it's like you kind of have your box to play in, and that you have to do the franchise justice, and there's a lot you have to work with, but and sometimes it could be complicated to make certain things work, but other times it just all kind of comes together, where I think when we were working on our arcade with our own IP, it's pretty freeing as far as like, oh, we got this cool gameplay mechanic, and we could kind of fit story or how it works around that mechanic rather than trying to make a mechanic work to fit the story essentially that's already there.
The IP game thing is very interesting. I've done previous IP games, and it's like, it depends on your relationship too, but it also depends on how the flexibility of that IP holder. Like Predator was amazing. Like we wrote so much stuff that's in the lore now, like we were the ones that were like in a meeting saying, we want to bring Dutch back. And everyone pretty much like, okay, whatever, dude. It's like, go ahead. And we literally just bulldogged it, kept on going. And they're like, listen, if you get Arnold to come back, go ahead. And we did everything we could to bring Arnold back. And it was amazing because we got to do all of it. And they're like, yeah, that's great. And then like other IPs, there was like a lot of just like, nope, you can't get outside of this box. You can't do any of these things. And also like, okay, cool, we're stuck in this box, but we need these things. And then it's like, yeah. And it never came to fruition, or the other elements didn't come in. And it's like, that's where the two sides of IP games can really kind of really stifle you. Especially with like, hey, we're making the game, we're like, our name's on the line and we need these things. And if we don't get them, then it's like the game's bad. And the gamers don't understand like, well, it's because the IP guys didn't give them these things. And it's some things that are completely out of our hand, but we've been really good at finding some pretty amazing partners.
Yeah, speaking of like, I mean, like I know, for example, like F13, Jason is in copyright hell in a lot of cases. I don't even know how that game got made, if I'm being honest, because I guess there's some weird loophole with his likeness and his rights and who owns it, and it goes back and forth. There's certain people have certain last calls on things, and that can really bog down game development too. When you're like, stuck tweaking a model like 27 times every single time you go for approval. If it needs approval, it can get really annoying and just time consuming.
Yeah, for sure. Not having to go through an approval process and make what we want to make is pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, you are the approval process.
Yeah.
You are the
exactly.
process this time. Yeah,
and that was the great part about and that was we've been doing IP games for so long, and so when it was like Isaac just going like, here's a guy, and be like, let's do this and let's do that, and it's like, okay, let's remove the noses, or let's go for these kind of color palettes for their skin. And then he came back with this other crazy shit. It's like, yes, I don't care. Yeah. And it's just like everything just fell into the machine versus like, got clogged up in approval hell, or, these other elements are like, hey, we've got this crazy idea. It's like, yeah, throw it in. Let's do it. As long as it can meet milestones, and as long as we're going to hit these deadlines, just keep on going and going. And I mean, that's the crazy part right now is like, we support F-13, we supported Predator, but, launching the game and having it be physical full launch versus like an early access where it's like, let's get it early access. I mean, one, announcing and launching the same day was kind of difficult because we weren't able to kind of like test what people kind of resonated with. So it was just like, here it is, let's hope people like it. And now that we have the game out and people are able to kind of give us feedback on different elements, we're able to make the game, of course, better. But the best part is like, we don't plan on having it full until early next year, and so everything that we're doing is just like making the game super malleable and adding more and more and more. And when we launched a full game like Predator and F-13, it's like everyone's expecting, okay, this is a name brand thing, this should be fully fleshed out and done. And we all know games take a few months sometimes, or a few weeks, or a bad weekend to get servers and all of those other elements really dialed in. And so it's been a fun process all around, really.
Your studio has like it's such a interesting melting pot of different developers and different experiences. I believe you even have one of the original, I could be wrong on this, but you have one of the original Dead by Daylight developers as well at your studio, or did at one time.
No. I mean, we were friends with those guys, actually. Like, we worked with Behavior on Star Citizen.
Okay.
And so like our paths crossed, and it was just kind of funny because we always just kind of knew each other. And I remember having one of the guys on Skype, and when we launched like F-13, he was like, "Oh, come on, bud, you could do this," like almost a little rival shit talking in a way. But like at the same time, everyone's like, yeah, we both did something that while it might have had similarities, they were two very different games. But I think that's the thing, like, we've been around for 14 years, and Jared, you're what, coming up on 4 years?
Some odd.
or 4 years here?
Yeah, 4 years here, but 20 some odd years in
the industry. But like, that was really like F-13 is what allowed us to really grow and kind of build a lot of different key people around a talented team we already kind of had, or with a talented team we already had. So but yeah, I mean, we've been around for a while and worked with studios like Obsidian and Turtle Rock and like Crytek and did a bunch of work for hire, and just kind of knew a lot of those. But no, we actually never had someone from Dead by Daylight on the team.
Interesting. No, it's good to know, because I remember hearing about that when Friday the 13th was announced. I was like, oh, they got someone, but because what you hear is not always true. Yeah, but you can't exactly search. I mean, tried to search for it, but if it was announced, it was probably under wraps still. But
when I think a lot of people always thought there was a rivalry there between the two groups, and internet want to make whatever. And I think the only thing we really said is like, yeah, we worked with Behavior in the past, and they were super talented, and we all still like get along, and every now and then maybe on the internet chat. So
yeah, game studios aren't like rappers. We don't get internet beef too much. It's actually kind of funny. Like there are like the rival schools, but when it comes to like a game industry event or something like that, like it's kind of funny how much we all just kind of bro up, and because it is kind of one of those things where we're all coming from the same battlefields of like shipping a game and making a game work on a console in most cases.
Yeah. You guys talked about the war a little bit of Arcadegeddon, and from what I've played and what I've seen, it was, what were the inspirations? Because I feel like there's a lot of Player One in there from the book, like the Oasis, right? Like that's how I feel like this world is kind of like that.
Yeah, I mean, really, it was was the idea. So the idea that we had, and that's starting to come into fruition as we get further into early access, is like, each world we wanted to play a different style of game. And so, especially when like you're playing and then you jump into the mid tile and you play the multiplayer game. And, really what we wanted to do is like make a procedurally built world that is fresh each time you play. So like you party up with your friends or you play by yourself, and it's not the same old thing over and over again. And really it was like, how do we make sense of this? Like, well, it should just be in an arcade or something like that. It should be like all these games connected together, and Gilly's been this character that's, made all these games. So, getting those different styles and themes of arcades. And yeah, it did definitely get into that player one. I'm positive I watched that so many times on international flights that a little bit of it connected into it for sure. But yeah, I mean, really the whole goal of it was like, there was a lot of like, I want to figure out how to make like a Mario Party style game when you play with your friends and you just play this craziness. And that's actually really what we hit really hard with our multiplayer that's coming out next, is you party up with your friends and you have like these 3-minute multiplayer rounds that just range from different crazy type of game modes. And it's pretty fun to get lost in that. And then, it was supposed to be that and then a little bit of a single player. But then when we started really getting the tile based system and all of the AI in, it was like, man, this whole thing's becoming, more fun. And we kind of transitioned back and forth between those two worlds a lot. And it definitely gave it that kind of, party-esque, co-op party shooter, type of weird thing. But like the whole genesis was like top score arcade,
NBA Jam type, kind of thing.
Oh yeah. I've got a 1-up NBA Jam right that I'm looking at right now. But it is definitely one of those things where, I miss the fun of just like that arcade game where you come up, like the Ninja Turtles, in Time or something like that, where you play that game with your buddies, you try to get that top score, you try to get your name in the leaderboard. Was kind of the whole genesis of it. Like, you come in, you play, it gets super hard if you want it to get super hard, or you kind of control, the depth of how deep you want to go that play. And, it's kind of crazy because like, we have been making games a really long time, and I have made a lot of games, and this is the first game that like I really still want to play all the time, and I still want to jump in with buddies and I send a code to someone, and as we get onto more platforms and as more people are able to get it, like it's just one of those games that it just resonates back, where it's like I could jump in, play for 30 minutes, get some stuff, and go back and play some other game that we're gonna jump onto. And like it's kind of like that kind of like palate cleanser for the night. But when multiplayer comes out, like it's pretty crazy how like the glitch ball game mode, where it's like your team versus the other team, and you have ice guns or a bat, and you have to get this ball into some baskets. It's just one of those games where I yell so much when we're playing that all the time now, and it's like that's just one of those things where it resonates with me. It's like I feel like when I'm yelling and screaming of either terror or pure joy, like that's I'm always proud of a game that I've created with a group of people when you get that type of crazy emotion.